Yeah, okay, so yeah, Alexander the Great. Yeah, so they brought out their civilization out there to teach the rest of the world their Greek traditions, you know, maybe even Olympic Games and all that stuff. I don't know, but it ended up working. I think it brought some more society to the Middle East. Maybe even with blood. Maybe it brought a white guy infusion of genetics into the Eastern world too, with the Greeks. But yes, I think Greco-Bactrian was one. Seleucids was one, and then of course the New Babylon. Only Babylon under power of Greeks was one, and then there was the Ptolemies in Egypt. He moved to Egypt, Alexandria, and he had Ptolemy 1, Ptolemy 2, Ptolemy 3. They all called themselves Ptolemy. And then the women were called Cleopatra, so there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. And then the final Cleopatra, Cleopatra 7, she was the one who did the nasty with Julius Caesar and had a little baby Julius Caesar. But then she committed suicide after getting her ass kicked by Augustus Caesar. And then Egypt annexed Egypt annexed Greece, that part of Greece. So yeah, after Alexander, I don't know who took over Macedon after that and Greece, but Greece was just kept going. And then they had a couple hundred years later, in about 160, they had another dude who was like a tyrant dude, who was from Macedon, and his name was Philip. Maybe he was a descendant of Alexander's daddy, Philip, but he was taking over Greeks too, but he was kind of being a bastard. I don't think they liked him. He was charging too much taxes or fighting too much or something. And by then the Romans were getting really strong. So the Romans came in and fought him in some big battle called Battle of Gargamella or something. I don't know. I know that is a battle. I don't know if that's the one. But it was Romans against Macedonians, and the Macedonians had their phalanx fighting division. Those dudes with the really long poles and spears. And the Romans, I think, you know, they had a phalanx division too, but they also utilized swords, and they utilized catapults, and they utilized cavalry. Romans utilized a lot of different stuff, and so that's why they were good fighters. They ended up flanking him and getting his dudes from the back, where they were like the soft underbelly, and killed them and scattered them and killed that dude. And after that, they took over pretty much all of Greece. Greece became a protectorate of vassal kingdoms of Roman Empire in about 162 BC. It's about the same time as they were having the Punic Wars as well. Rome was taking over that whole area about that time. And when they took over Athens, though, they allowed Athens to keep their archons. So they had respect for Greek tradition, and they would go over there and they prayed to the same gods as them. They just changed names. Artemis became Diana, Herod became Juno, Zeus became Jupiter, Apollo became somebody, Bacchus became Dionysus. You know, same dealio. So they got along. Trajan, though, back in 100 and the year 100 or something, did dismantle the Temple of Zeus and bring it back to Rome. Temple of Zeus in Athens. I don't know how he did that, because it was huge. He was the smaller version of it. But yeah, so there's not really a whole lot of history of Greece that I know of in the Roman times, because it's basically just the story of Rome, and it was just, I guess, peaceful, you know. Being in the Roman Empire could have been a good thing, because they just wouldn't fight amongst themselves, because they were all loyal to the great emperor and the big army, and so they didn't fight and they had peace. And I think it worked out great. I think the Roman Empire served a great purpose, and it was because people talk after the Roman Empire, shit went downhill. There was no more trading. There was pirates all over the place. You know, literacy went down, aqueducts went down, infrastructure went down. Yeah, so I think the Roman Empire was a good time for Greece. They didn't produce, I don't know of them producing any great, new developments. But you know, there are probably plenty of philosophers and sculptors and all that kind of stuff as back in the golden age of Greece. It's just that we don't know of them because people become famous when they invent something new. But when you repeat stuff that somebody else invented, it's just same old, so you're not remembered, right? So I'm sure that they were doing okay. And then the Eastern Empire started. Byzantium got begun by some dude, and then it was actually turned into its own capital, the capital of the Eastern Empire. You know, just as strong. Didn't answer to Rome. Under Constantine, he was the first emperor. He began his imperialship in Rome, but then he ended it in Constantinople. He moved to Constantinople. And then, of course, there was another Roman emperor who took over in Rome. And then they kept Rome going. But then after a couple hundred years, whatever, Rome actually moved. The Western Roman Empire moved their capital to Milan for a couple hundred years. And then they moved it from Milan to Ravenna for the last 75 years. So, you know, you think the Roman Empire fell in 476. Well, the Rome as the capital of the Roman Empire actually ended in like 350 or something like that. But anyways, when was that? Like 320 or something? It was when Constantine moved his capital to Byzantine, and he became Christian. He was the first Christian emperor. Christianity was growing, and Christianity actually, one of the founding countries of Christianity was Greece, because Apostle Paul was a Roman citizen, but he was from Tarsus, which is in eastern Turkey, modern day eastern Turkey, because that was part of the Roman Empire in those days. And he spoke Greek. Actually, somebody said he was a Greek. I guess he spoke Greek. He spent a lot of time in Greece. He was a Pharisee, so he persecuted Christians. He was a Jewish. But then he had like some mystical vision of Jesus. Why are you persecuting me? And so he became Christian. But he preached a lot to Greeks. You know, like one of the chapters of the Bible is Corinthians. There's 1st and 2nd Corinthians, because he was preaching in Corinth, which is that city right there on the street, the Isthmus of Corinth, right where the Peloponnesian connects with the mainland. And he went there a couple times. He started the church there and then went back. And then, of course, there's Thessalonians. That's another chapter in the New Testament. And that's when he went to Thessaloniki, which is near the Macedonian capital where Alexander the Great was from. And he started the church there and preached to them. They're Greeks. So you can see how... And then Romans, he went and preached to the Romans. So you can see how Greece was a big, you know, founding father of a Christian religion. And a lot of those New Testament chapters, I think, were originally written in Greek. Some of them were written in Hebrew, but some of them were written in Greek. And I think maybe even one of them was written in Latin. I think Revelation was written in Latin by some dude named John. But Apostle Paul ended up getting beheaded in Rome because they thought he was like trying to take over the Roman Empire or something with this new Jesus dude. But yeah, so they were, you know, and they were subjugated to the Catholic Church for a while. But then they had the Great Schism, and they broke away from the Roman Catholic Church because they had, I guess, the two popes were arguing about something. So then it became the Eastern Orthodox Church. So you have the Catholic Church and Roman Catholic Church, but then you have the Greek Catholic Church. But I think they officially reunited like 100 years ago or something. So now it's just the Roman Catholic Church. I'm not totally sure about that. But they did kiss and make up. But anyways, let's see here. There's the Byzantium was started by Constantine. And so those dudes, the people who were in Byzantium, they were pretty much Greeks. They spoke Greek. I think they even wrote in Greek. It was basically like a revival of Greece, Constantinople. And it was a big city. It was like, It had the longest aqueduct ever. It was like a 160-mile long aqueduct or something. Huge aqueduct that could feed the whole thing because they didn't have like a big river passing through the middle of it. And it was right there on the Straits of Isthmus or whatever that's called. Isthmus of Corinth, Isthmus of Dardanelles, Strait of Dardanelles. And so it was a really strategic trading place that everybody wanted. And they built these huge walls around it. And they were really rich. They did great. They were on top of stuff. They you know, like their leaders lived a really long time. They built, I think it was Justinian. There was this one dude named Justinian, which is where the word justice comes from, which is ironic because he wasn't just, but he created the Hagia Sophia, which is this big dome. At the time, it was the biggest dome, and I think even today, it's like the second biggest dome in the world, indoor dome in the world, after St. Peter's, and then there's Hagia Sophia, and then there's one right next to it that I think the Muslims made because they thought it was cool. They wanted to make another one, which is just about as big, or almost as big. And yeah, but he made that, but I guess he taxed a whole, and he also, the Roman Empire had fallen. I don't remember when this was, like the 500s or something. But the Roman Empire had already fallen, the Western Roman Empire, and he wanted to recapture the Western Roman Empire, to like rebuild the Roman Empire. And he did, actually, a large part of it. But then, and when he died, it went away because it was, I guess they were past the time of having one big empire that could control everything. Other people were too independent-minded. But he was spending a lot of money, and I think he erected the Hagia Sophia too fast because it collapsed after he died, and then somebody else rebuilt it, and the one that he rebuilt wasn't quite as big, but it wasn't as wide. It was more steep and narrow, so it didn't collapse, and it's the one that survives now. But he was taxing a lot, so he had a big revolt against him. He also, he married a prostitute named Justinian, and I can't remember her name, but she was like supposed to be really hot and really smart and stuff. She was a member of basically the prostitute class, the courtesan class. There's a class of women like aristocratic women, I guess, but back in those days they were like nasty. They were like skanky, so they'd screw you, not just hang out with you, but they'd screw you too and dance in front of you and stuff. Burlesque dancer. Married her, and then he actually officially gave her half power of the entire kingdom. I guess he was the first feminist of the world. But anyways, they had this big revolt. They went to one of the games, one of the chariot races one day, and everybody was like chanting against him, revolt, revolt. So he was like, oh shit, they're gonna revolt. So he ran back, guarded himself up in the palace, and his wife was like, he's like, let's get the hell out of here, let's run, they're gonna kill us. And she's like, no way, I'm staying, I don't care what happens, I'm staying. So he's like, oh well, if you stay, I guess I'll stay too. So he stayed, and then he had the idea that he would he'd have like a meeting with the leaders of the rebellion. So he'd had 30,000 of the leaders of the rebellion go into the place, the hippodrome, and he would go meet them, but instead of showing up, he just brought his army and locked him in and slaughtered them all, and that was it. That was it with the rebellion, because all the leaders, 30,000 of the fervent leaders, were dead. So yeah, and then he went on, he died, and then there's some other people, and they went okay for a while. But then there was some new empires cropping up. There was the Bulgarian Empire, who was encroaching on their land, and I don't know where they came from. I don't know what tribe they were from, but they came up and were getting big. But they had a battle, and they had this one dude named Basil, and he was a good warrior, and he kind of had a revival for the Byzantinians because he kicked their Bulgarians' asses. He had this one fight against the Bulgarians where he killed the army, and then all of the survivors, he blinded 99 out of 100 dudes, and then he'd blind one of the eyes of the 100th guy. So one dude with one eye had to lead 99 dudes back all the way to their homeland. And when they got there, you know, they became like basically useless, you know, because they were blind. So they couldn't work up another army to come and attack the Byzantinians. But the Byzantinians had like laws and stuff, and there's even a word we use. It's something is very Byzantinian. They mean it's very like old and outdated. There's actually another word that they use for the Athenians. If something's draconian, that's also a very old and outdated law, because this dude named Draco started the draconian law code of Athens that was very, it was kind of, I don't remember what it was, but it was just not very pleasant for the slaves and stuff. So it ended up becoming like outdated after a while. But anyways, yeah, Byzantine, they were around for a long time, and maybe I guess maybe they probably taxed too much and got their royal family, and the capital city was so rich that they just kind of started having rebellion after rebellion, not wanting to support big, rich, old Byzantine anymore. So they got smaller and smaller, and then they, you know, back in the end, they pretty much were just a kingdom, you know, like just an average kingdom. They were about as big as, actually, it was about the same size as what Turkey owns in modern day European side of the Dardanelles. That's about how big the entire Byzantine kingdom was when they were sacked by the Ottomans, who were the Turkic tribe, who back in like 1450 brought all these cannons and bashed down their wall with the cannons. It was like the first siege with cannons, and took them over. Yeah, so that's no more like Greek history, because the Turks, they were speaking another language. They were Muslim, different society. But then the Turks, they grew. The Turkish civilization grew up bigger and bigger, and actually took over Greece, and took over Albania, and took over Bosnia, and maybe even Serbia. Turned everybody into Muslims, right? Because they were the Muslims. So that's why there's lots of Muslims in like Bosnia and stuff. You know, maybe that's one of the reasons why there were so many of those wars in Albania last 100 years ago, or actually 10 years ago too. And the Muslims actually ended up going all the way into Vienna and besieged Vienna, Austria. They weren't successful though. But they were in control of Greece all the way up until like World War I. The Ottoman Empire lasted until World War I, when it was dissolved, and then just kind of basically went down to current day Turkey. But the Greeks had lots of battles against them, along with those other dudes having battles against them. I think right before World War I or during World War I, it was part of World War I, and like maybe like right after World War I, the Ottoman Empire was dissolved in like 1922, so just a couple years after World War I. But yeah, so nowadays, so Greek has only been an independent country for like less than 100 years. You know, but yet they have their own culture. They have their own written language, their own text, their own alphabet, and so they're really pissed off. Still, they're really pissed off at the Turks. They don't like the Turks, and the Turks don't like them. Maybe because the Turks just weren't good to them when they were there. I don't know, but they were in charge of Greece for a long ass time. And then, you know, back in 1896, they had the Olympics. Oh, well, when they had the Olympics in Athens, it was part of the Ottoman Empire. It was part of the Turks. It's interesting to think about. But yeah, but now Greek is coming up. Greece right now is having problems. When I was in Greece last summer, they were having an economic problem, and they were getting big loans from the IMF and from the European Union. And somebody said that the Greeks only had like 8 months left of the money, the 20 billion bucks or whatever that the European Union loaned them, and that they weren't going to be able to pay that back or get their shit together by then. So people were thinking about kicking them out of the European Union. And yeah, so it's kind of sad. When I was there in like big problems for them, and they seemed perfectly happy to me. You know, Greek seems fine, but that's probably part of the Greek psyche. Because I heard from people who had lived there and people who would work for them that they're just really lazy. Like they, you know, like if you, like there was these underwater archaeologists, and they'd go there, all the underwater archaeologists working together, and all the Americans and stuff would work their asses off all day, but their Greek compatriots would just be hanging out on the beach drinking beer the whole time and collecting the money. And so they were just Mediterranean lifestyle, I guess, Mediterranean attitude. It's really beautiful out there though, so I can see why you would feel totally cool about just kicking back on the beach. I want to do a kayak trip through those islands one day. I've got to do that. That'd be awesome. Be like, pretend I'm Jason of the Argonauts. But let's see. Yeah, so I'd like to know what's going down with Greece now. It's really expensive because it's part of the European Union, but I like the Greeks. They were a little bit like short-tempered. Like they'd roll their eyes at you and like do this, get frustrated a lot. But they were generous. They weren't like out to get my money, you know. And like not like they had to be, because they were charged up the ass. It was fucking European prices over there. But and they were okay at English. They weren't the best, but they weren't the worst. Yeah, so that's about history of Greece for me.